Have you ever felt so small that you wondered if anyone would ever believe in you again? Have you ever worked so hard, given everything you had, only to have someone look down on you like you were nothing? That's exactly where Marcus Johnson found himself one cold Wednesday morning in November. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He wasn't looking for anyone to rescue him. All he wanted was to do his job and take care of his daughter. But what happened that day would shatter everything he believed about human nature and teach him something beautiful about the power of a single moment of grace. This is the story of how one act of cruelty became the catalyst for something extraordinary. It's about a CEO who thought he was better than everyone around him, and a single dad who was just trying to survive. It's about the tattoo on Marcus's arm that would change everything, and the lesson both men would learn about what it really means to be successful. Stay with us because this story will remind you why kindness matters so much in a world that often feels cold and uncaring. Before we dive into this incredible story, we want to invite you to join the Kindness Hub family. If you believe in the power of human connection and stories that inspire, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Leave a comment below and tell us about a time when someone showed you unexpected kindness. And if this story touches your heart, please give it a like. Now, let's begin. Marcus Johnson woke up at 5 in the morning, like he did every single day. His alarm didn't go off with some fancy chime or musical melody. It was the sound of his daughter Emma coughing in the next room. At 8 years old, she had asthma that flared up during the cold months, and Marcus had become an expert at recognizing every variation of that cough. Some mornings it was just a little tickle. Other mornings, like today, it meant she was struggling. He rolled out of bed, his knees aching from years of working underneath cars, and went to check on her. She was sitting up in bed, her small frame shaking slightly, reaching for the inhaler on her nightstand. Marcus sat beside her, rubbing her back in slow circles the way he'd learned from YouTube videos and from asking the nurses at her pediatrician's office. He didn't have health insurance that would cover much, but he scraped together what he could for Emma's checkups. She was his entire world, his reason for getting up every morning, even on days when his body screamed at him to rest. Her mother had left when Emma was 3 years old, claiming she couldn't handle the responsibility and the struggle of single parenthood. Marcus never blamed her, not really. Life was hard, and not everyone was built to handle hard. But he was. He had to be. By 6:30, Emma was breathing easier, and Marcus was in the shower trying to wake himself up properly. The water was lukewarm at best. Their apartment's water heater had been temperamental for months, but fixing it would cost money he didn't have. He made a mental note to check online for a tutorial. Maybe he could fix it himself on Sunday, his only day off. As the water ran over his tired body, Marcus thought about what the day ahead held. He had 6 appointments scheduled at the auto shop where he worked, 2 of which were complicated transmission jobs. Mr. Chen, who owned the shop, had promised him a small bonus if he could get through the backlog this week. A bonus meant maybe he could finally fix the leak in their bathroom ceiling. Marcus got Emma ready for school, packed her lunch in a container he'd washed and reused so many times the plastic had begun to cloud, and dropped her off at her elementary school. She hugged him tight, and he kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry shampoo she loved. These moments, the everyday moments that most people probably took for granted, were everything to Marcus. He made the 30-minute drive to Superior Auto Repair, the shop where he'd worked for the past 6 years. His hands were already anticipating the work, the familiar muscle memory of turning wrenches and diagnosing engine problems pulling him forward. The morning shift started like any other. Marcus was elbow deep in a transmission pan when the bell above the shop door chimed. A man walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's entire monthly rent. He was tall, immaculately groomed, with the kind of confidence that only comes from a lifetime of people telling you that you're important. This was Richard Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies, one of the largest aerospace companies in the country. He had a vintage sports car that needed work, and word around the shop was that he was particular about who touched his vehicle. Mr. Chen had called Marcus in specifically because of his reputation for meticulous work on high-end cars. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag that hadn't been clean in days and came out to greet the customer. Richard barely glanced at him. His eyes were already scanning the shop with a look of disdain that made Marcus feel like the space had suddenly become much smaller. Richard started pointing out every perceived imperfection in the shop. The floors weren't pristine. One of the other mechanics had left a tool on the counter. The coffee in the waiting area looked old. It was as if he was conducting an inspection of a facility that had personally insulted him. Marcus listened quietly, letting Mr. Chen handle the conversation, but he felt the weight of that dismissive gaze as Richard's eyes landed on him and seemed to look right through him. When Mr. Chen explained that Marcus would be the one handling his car, Richard's lip curled slightly. He asked what Marcus's qualifications were, and when Mr. Chen began to explain Marcus's credentials and his years of experience, Richard interrupted. He said he could tell just by looking at him that Marcus was exactly the kind of person he'd expected to find in a place like this. He said it with the kind of casual cruelty that comes from never having to think about how your words affect other people. He said Marcus probably didn't have much ambition, that working with his hands and never advancing was probably all someone like him could aspire to. He smiled when he said it, like he'd made a clever observation instead of cutting someone down. The shop seemed to go quiet. Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he forced himself to stay composed. Mr. Chen looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to say something, but hesitant to do so. Marcus simply nodded, assured Richard that his car would be in good hands, and went back to work. But the words had landed. They'd burrowed into the part of him that, sometimes, late at night after Emma was asleep, wondered if he was doing enough, if he was being the kind of father his daughter deserved. He was a single parent working a job that didn't pay much, in a city where the cost of living kept rising. Was that failure? Was that something to be ashamed of? Marcus threw himself into the work on Richard's car with an intensity that he usually reserved for Emma's important moments. He worked through his lunch break. He noticed a small issue with the fuel injectors that wasn't on the work order, and he fixed it anyway because that's who Marcus was. He stayed late to make sure everything was perfect, running the car and listening to the engine the way some people listen to music, hearing the health and harmony in every sound. By the time he finished, Richard's car was in better condition than when it had arrived. The next day, Richard came to pick up his car. Marcus had polished the exterior. He'd even detailed the interior. He explained all the work that had been done, including the fuel injector issue he'd caught and fixed at no extra charge. Richard listened with an expression that suggested he already knew all of this was going to be done well, that he'd expected nothing less. He inspected the car critically, looking for something to complain about, but there was nothing. He paid the bill and prepared to leave, and Marcus thought that would be the end of it. Just another customer, another interaction with someone who lived in a completely different world. But as Richard was walking toward his car, his eyes fell on Marcus's arm. Marcus was wearing his usual work uniform, a short-sleeved shirt that revealed the large tattoo running along his left bicep. It was a guardian angel, wings spread wide, and beneath it were two names, Emma and Diane. Diane was Marcus's mother, who had passed away when Marcus was 25, just 2 years before Emma was born. She'd been the one who raised him after his own father left, who'd taught him about hard work and dignity and loving people fiercely. He'd gotten the tattoo after her death, a way of carrying her with him always, and the angel watched over both her memory and his daughter's life. Richard stopped. For the first time since he'd walked into that shop, something in his expression shifted. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was more like a door opening very slowly, letting in a small amount of light. He asked Marcus about the tattoo. Slowly, carefully, Marcus told him. He talked about his mother, about Emma, about how the angel was there to watch over both of them. As Marcus spoke, he noticed something changing in Richard's face. His jaw unclenched, his shoulders relaxed. It was as if the tattoo had somehow translated Marcus into a language Richard could suddenly understand. Richard admitted then, standing in that auto shop in his expensive suit, that he'd been wrong. He said it simply, directly, and with more sincerity than Marcus would have expected from someone like him. He apologized for what he'd said, for the way he'd treated Marcus, for letting his own insecurities and his need to feel superior to others override his basic decency. He explained something that Marcus had never known, something that would change how he understood that moment forever. Richard had a daughter too, a teenager now who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years because of his absence from her life. He'd been so focused on building his company, on accumulating success and money and status, that he'd missed her childhood entirely. Her mother had given him her name and a photo when she was born, and he'd seen that photo maybe twice in her first 18 years. Marcus listened, and he found that his anger, which he hadn't even fully acknowledged he was carrying, began to ease. He realized that Richard's cruelty hadn't really been about Marcus at all. It had been about Richard's own pain, his own failure, projected outward onto someone vulnerable enough to absorb it. They talked for another hour, right there in the shop, about fatherhood and sacrifice and what it meant to be a good parent. Richard asked Marcus about Emma, and Marcus found himself sharing stories he usually kept private, talking about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, about how smart she was, about the way she looked at the world with wonder and kindness that made him believe in good things. By the time Richard left that day, something fundamental had shifted between them. Richard asked if he could return, not to have his car serviced, but to talk. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Richard met regularly. Richard became fascinated by Marcus's approach to fatherhood, his wisdom about balancing work and presence, about showing up emotionally for his daughter even when he was exhausted. Richard began making changes in his own life. He reached out to his daughter slowly and patiently, apologizing for the years of absence. He went to therapy to work through the patterns that had made him the kind of person who tore others down to build himself up. He started showing up differently at his company, treating his employees with respect and recognizing that success meant nothing if it was built on a foundation of treating people poorly. 3 months after that first meeting, Richard did something that shocked the entire community. He established a scholarship fund for children of single parents, with a specific emphasis on helping those families access better education and resources. He named it the Marcus Johnson Foundation, not because Marcus had asked for recognition, but because Richard wanted to honor what Marcus had taught him about real success. The fund was seeded with a significant amount of money, enough to help hundreds of families every year. But what was more important to Richard and Marcus was what the fund represented. It was an acknowledgement that people's worth isn't measured by their job title or their bank account, but by their character, their love, and their capacity to show up for the people who depend on them. Emma got to meet Richard's daughter, Sophie, who was struggling in high school and needed help with her academics. Marcus's expertise with cars suddenly became useful in a completely unexpected way when he helped Sophie with a school project on engines. Sophie started coming to the auto shop after school sometimes, learning from Marcus and gradually beginning to rebuild her relationship with her father. Richard and Marcus became genuine friends, the kind who text silly things to each other and grab coffee on Sunday mornings before picking up their kids. Richard became Emma's unofficial godfather, attending her school events and helping her with homework. He'd never been a parent present in Emma's life, but he became one in every way except biologically. The most beautiful part of this story, though, isn't the scholarship fund or the financial help that Richard was able to provide to Marcus and Emma. It's what both men learned about themselves and about what it means to choose kindness. Marcus learned that sometimes the people who hurt us are just hurting themselves, and that compassion doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, but it does mean understanding the brokenness that drives people to harm others. Richard learned that all the money in the world can't buy you what Marcus had freely given throughout his entire life: respect, integrity, and the genuine love of a child who knows that her father would do anything for her. He learned that success without meaning is just accumulation, and that the things that truly matter can't be bought or earned through status. Years later, when Emma graduated high school at the top of her class and was accepted to the state university to study animal science, both Marcus and Richard sat in the audience crying. Emma hugged them both afterward, and in that moment, three people from completely different worlds were bound together by something stronger than circumstance or background. It was the understanding that kindness costs nothing but can change everything. It was the proof that people can grow, that redemption is possible, and that sometimes all it takes is one moment of genuine human connection to shift the entire trajectory of a life. This story reminds us of something important that we often forget in our busy, judgmental world. We don't know what people are carrying. We don't know how their day is going, how much they're struggling, or what they're sacrificing for the people they love. We don't know if the person in front of us is working 2 jobs to feed their kids, or if they're grieving someone they've lost, or if they're just barely holding it together on any given day. When we choose to mock someone, to tear them down, or to treat them as less than, we're not really judging their worth. We're revealing our own emptiness. We're showing the world that we've forgotten how to see the humanity in people who don't look like us or live like us. But this story also reminds us that it's never too late to choose differently. Richard Ashford was the kind of person who seemed beyond reach, so full of his own importance that he couldn't see the value in anyone else. But the moment he was willing to really look at Marcus as a human being instead of someone beneath him, everything changed. That's the power that each of us holds. We have the power to make someone feel small or to make them feel seen. We have the power to confirm people's fears about themselves or to help them believe in their own worth. Every single interaction we have with another person matters. Every word we speak lands somewhere, takes root, and either grows into something beautiful or something poisonous. So here's what we want to ask you, our Kindness Hub family. Think about the people in your life, the ones you see every day, maybe without really seeing them. Think about the service workers, the teachers, the people who are doing jobs that might seem small to you but are absolutely essential to the world running. Think about the single parents you know who are doing everything they can just to keep their kids safe and loved. Think about the people who've disappointed you or hurt you, and consider whether they might be carrying something you don't understand. Not because you owe them anything, but because recognizing the humanity in others is what makes us human ourselves. It's what connects us all across every difference we think separates us. Choose kindness today. Not the performative kind that you do for social media, but the real kind. The kind that costs you something. The kind that means seeing someone who feels invisible and letting them know that they matter. The kind that means admitting when you're wrong and changing your behavior. The kind that means believing in people's capacity to grow and change, just like Marcus believed in Richard's capacity to do better. This is what Kindness Hub is all about, and we're so grateful that you're part of this community with us. Together, we're spreading the message that kindness isn't weakness, it's not naivete, and it's not letting people walk over you. Kindness is strength. Kindness is wisdom. Kindness is the most powerful force we have to change the world. One person, one moment, one choice at a time.